Claire Walsh stood in the center of the Galactic Combat Academy's main training arena, her fingers wrapped loosely around the handle of an ancient earth katana. The blade caught the overhead lights, throwing brief flashes across the polished floor. Around her, nearly 60 cadets from a dozen different species filled the observation platforms, their voices rising in a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Commander Thresh'kal circled her slowly, his massive form towering over the human cadet. The Vrexian instructor's forearms gestured dismissively at the sword in her hands, his mandibles clicking in what Claire had learned to recognize as contempt. His deep voice carried easily across the arena, meant for every ear present. "This is what the human brings to her final examination," Thresh'kal announced, pointing one clawed finger at the katana. "A piece of sharpened metal. A relic from a primitive past." He paused, letting the scattered laughter from the platforms wash over them. "Steel. Against plasma weapons that can cut through reinforced hull plating in seconds." Claire remained still, her posture relaxed but her eyes focused. She had expected this reaction. The Academy's curriculum centered entirely on energy weapons, shield technology, and ranged combat doctrine. Every species in the Galactic Coalition had abandoned physical blades centuries ago, sometimes millennia ago. To them, her request to demonstrate traditional Earth swordsmanship seemed absurd. A Keltharian cadet in the front row leaned over to whisper something to his companion, a gesture that made his translucent features shimmer. More laughter followed. Claire caught fragments of conversations drifting down from above. Does she think this is a museum exhibition? The human must be confused about the testing requirements. Maybe her equipment shipment was delayed and this is all she has. Thresh'kal stopped directly in front of Claire, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. His eyes were deep amber, divided by horizontal pupils that contracted as he studied her. "Cadet Walsh," he said, his tone shifting from mockery to something resembling genuine curiosity. "You have consistently scored in the top 15% of your class in tactical analysis, shield deployment, and plasma rifle accuracy. Your instructors speak well of your discipline and focus." Claire nodded once, accepting the assessment without pride or false modesty. "Then explain to me," Thresh'kal continued, his voice dropping lower, "why you would throw away a promising military career on this theater." He gestured at the sword again. "You submitted a formal request to demonstrate traditional Earth combat techniques for your final examination. You know the standards. You know what is expected. Yet you stand here with a weapon that has no place in modern warfare. Permission to speak, Commander?" Claire asked quietly. Thresh'kal's mandibles spread slightly, the Vrexian equivalent of raised eyebrows. "Granted." "I understand the standards, sir," Claire said, her voice calm and clear enough to carry to the observation platforms. "I know that Galactic Combat Doctrine emphasizes shield integrity, energy weapon efficiency, and maintaining tactical distance. I've studied these principles for 2 years. I've trained in them. I respect them. And yet," Thresh'kal prompted. "And yet Earth's military history suggests that unconventional approaches can be effective when properly applied," Claire continued. "Humans have faced superior weapons many times throughout our development. We've learned to adapt, to find angles that others don't consider. I believe that perspective has value." The murmur from the observation platforms grew louder. A Torvian cadet, her scales rippling with colors that indicated skepticism, called down, "Value as a historical curiosity, maybe. Not in actual combat." Thresh'kal held up one hand, silencing the crowd. His eyes never left Claire's face. "You believe you can demonstrate practical combat application with that blade? Against modern weapons?" "Yes, Commander." "Against plasma rifles?" "Yes, Commander." Thresh'kal was silent for several long seconds. Claire could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the weighing of options. Finally, his mandibles clicked 3 times in rapid succession, a sound she had learned meant decision. "Very well," he said, stepping back and addressing the entire arena. "Cadet Walsh requests an unconventional examination. I will grant this request, but with conditions." He turned his head toward the observation platforms. "Cadets Ren, Sola, and Vix. Report to the arena floor immediately. Full combat gear. Plasma rifles set to training intensity." 3 cadets descended from different sections of the platforms. Ren was a tall, angular Keltharian whose transparent skin revealed the faint glow of his internal organs. Sola, a compact Torvian female whose scales shifted through shades of blue and green, moved with the coiled energy of a natural hunter. Vix, a Carathian with 6 limbs and compound eyes, skittered down the stairs with unsettling speed. Claire watched them approach, her expression unchanging. She knew all three by reputation. Ren specialized in long-range precision shooting. Sola excelled at aggressive close-quarters suppression. Vix's multifaceted vision and multiple limbs made him exceptional at tracking fast-moving targets. Thresh'kal addressed the three-armed cadets as they assembled opposite Claire. Your task is simple. Cadet Walsh believes her primitive weapon has practical value. You will prove otherwise. Standard arena combat protocols. 3 minutes on the timer. If she survives the full duration or manages to disable all three of you, she passes her examination. His mandibles clicked again. I expect neither outcome to occur. Sola's scales rippled with orange tones of anticipation. Rules of engagement, Commander? Training intensity on your plasma rifles, Thresh'kal confirmed. Enough to disable shields and cause severe pain, not enough to cause permanent injury. Beyond that, standard combat doctrine applies. Maintain distance, use superior firepower, eliminate the threat efficiently. The three cadets moved to their starting positions while arena crew members activated the environmental controls. Cover barriers rose from the floor at intervals, creating a tactical landscape of walls, pillars, and obstacles. Overhead displays lit up, showing the arena layout and starting a 3-minute countdown timer. Claire walked slowly to her starting position in the center of the arena. She checked the katana one final time, her fingers tracing the wrapped handle, testing the balance. The blade itself was simple, traditional folded steel without any technological enhancement. No shields, no energy cores, no targeting assistance. Just metal and skill. Thresh'kal moved to the arena's edge, his voice amplifying across the space. This demonstration will proceed in 10 seconds. Cadets, prepare your weapons. Walsh, you may begin when the timer starts. The observation platforms fell completely silent. 60 pairs of eyes from a dozen species watched the human standing alone in the center of the arena, holding nothing but sharpened steel against 3 trained opponents with plasma weapons. Claire took a slow breath and settled into a ready stance, her blade held at a diagonal angle before her, both hands on the grip. Her eyes moved between her 3 opponents, noting their positions, their weapon angles, the way they distributed their weight. The countdown reached 0. The arena lights shifted to combat mode, bathing everything in harsh white illumination. And plasma fire erupted across the training floor. The first plasma bolt screamed past Claire's shoulder, so close she felt the heat wash across her skin. She was already moving before the second shot fired, her body dropping low and rotating left as brilliant blue energy carved through the space where her torso had been a heartbeat earlier. The third bolt hit the floor behind her, leaving a scorched mark on the reinforced surface. Claire didn't run in a straight line. She moved in irregular patterns, changing direction every few steps, never establishing a predictable rhythm. Her eyes tracked all 3 opponents simultaneously, reading their body language, watching where their weapons pointed, anticipating their next moves rather than reacting to their current ones. Ren fired again from the elevated position he had taken on top of a barrier. His Keltharian physiology gave him excellent distance vision, and his aim was precise. But precision meant nothing if the target wasn't where you expected her to be. Claire had already analyzed his shooting pattern during their shared training sessions. He favored a 2-shot burst, then a brief pause to recalibrate. She used that pause to slide behind a pillar, the plasma bolts hitting the barrier's edge and dissipating against the energy-resistant material. From the observation platforms, the watching cadets leaned forward. The expected outcome had been simple. 3 plasma rifles against 1 blade, the human disabled in seconds, the foolishness of primitive weapons demonstrated clearly. Instead, 20 seconds had passed and not a single shot had connected. Sola moved aggressively around the arena's perimeter, her Torvian reflexes allowing her to fire while in motion. Her scales had shifted to deep red, indicating frustration. She laid down suppressing fire, trying to pin Claire in place long enough for her companions to land a clean shot. Plasma bolts created a wall of superheated air, cutting off 3 potential escape routes. Claire went through the 4th route, one Sola hadn't considered. She vaulted over a low barrier, her free hand touching the top edge for balance while her body tucked and rolled. The katana remained secure in her other hand, the blade never scraping against the floor or obstacles. She came up running at a different angle, forcing all 3 shooters to adjust their positions. Vix scuttled along the arena wall, his 6 limbs giving him mobility that most species couldn't match. His compound eyes tracked Claire from multiple angles simultaneously, feeding him a comprehensive view of her movements. He fired calculated shots, trying to herd her toward his teammates rather than score direct hits. It was sound tactical thinking. Claire recognized the coordination immediately. They were trying to box her in, to eliminate her options until she had nowhere to go. It was standard Academy doctrine for dealing with mobile targets. Establish a kill zone, compress the enemy's movement area, force them into a position where multiple firing angles converged. She refused to cooperate. Instead of retreating from the compression, Claire accelerated toward it. Her path took her at an angle that made her difficult to track, moving between barriers fast enough that each shooter only had a fraction of a second to acquire and fire. Ren's shot missed high. Sola's missed low. Vix's caught the edge of a barrier that Claire had deliberately positioned between them. The timer showed 2 minutes and 15 seconds remaining. Thresh'kal watched from the arena's edge, his forearms crossed over his massive chest. His mandibles remained perfectly still, his amber eyes tracking every movement. The mockery had faded from his expression, replaced by focused analysis. Around him, the observation platforms had gone almost silent. The expected demonstration of human foolishness had become something else entirely. Claire's breathing remained controlled and steady despite her constant movement. Her martial arts training had emphasized breath control, the management of oxygen and energy during extended physical exertion. She didn't waste motion or momentum. Every step served a purpose, either moving her toward better position or forcing her opponents to adjust their own positions disadvantageously. Ren changed tactics. He stopped trying to lead his shots and instead fired at the barriers Claire was using for cover, attempting to deny her the protected positions. It was a reasonable adjustment, but it revealed his frustration. Plasma rifles had excellent range and power, but they weren't infinite. Each shot drained the weapon's charge pack slightly. Sustained rapid fire would eventually require a reload. Claire filed that information away and kept moving. Sola and Vix attempted a pincer movement, approaching from opposite sides to catch Claire in crossfire. Their timing was good, their angles well calculated. Against a standard opponent, it would have worked perfectly. Claire saw it developing 3 seconds before they committed. She waited until the last possible moment, until both shooters had fired and their plasma bolts were already in flight. Then she dropped flat to the floor, her body going completely horizontal. Both shots passed over her, missing by less than a hand's width. The energy weapons hummed as they recalibrated for the unexpected position change. Claire rolled sideways, came up on her feet, and sprinted toward Vix's position. The Carathian's compound eyes widened in surprise. Humans weren't supposed to move that fast, weren't supposed to close distance against superior firepower. Every species in the galaxy had learned the same lesson. Stay at range, use your weapon's reach advantage, never let a close-quarters specialist get near you. Vix fired rapidly, his 6 limbs allowing him to brace the rifle steadily while backpedaling. The shots were accurate, professional, exactly what Academy training prescribed. Claire flowed around them like water around stones, her spatial awareness allowing her to track the plasma bolt's trajectories without looking directly at them. She read Vix's body language, saw where his rifle pointed, predicted where he would fire next. At 15 feet of separation, Claire suddenly changed direction, breaking off her advance and circling left. Vix adjusted his aim to follow, and in doing so, positioned himself directly in Ren's firing line. The Keltharian was forced to hold his shot to avoid hitting his teammate. 1 second of hesitation. That was all Claire needed. She used that second to reach a barrier that put her in cover from all 3 opponents simultaneously. Her back pressed against the solid surface, her breathing still controlled, her mind processing the tactical situation. The timer showed 1 minute and 30 seconds remaining. From the observation platforms, a Torvian instructor leaned toward her colleague, a Vrexian tactical specialist. "She's not trying to win," the Torvian observed quietly. "She's studying them." The Vrexian's mandibles clicked in agreement. "She's analyzing their patterns, their coordination, their weapon capabilities. The human is gathering intelligence." Thresh'kal heard the exchange but said nothing. His eyes remained locked on the arena floor, watching Claire's katana catch the light as she shifted position behind the barrier. The blade hadn't been used yet, hadn't blocked or deflected a single shot. It simply existed in her hands, balanced and ready, waiting for its moment. Sola's scales had shifted to purple now, indicating both frustration and grudging respect. She made a hand signal to her teammates, switching to a different formation pattern. All 3 shooters began moving in coordinated rhythm, establishing overlapping fields of fire, eliminating the safe spaces that Claire had been using. The timer hit 1 minute remaining. Claire's fingers adjusted slightly on the katana's grip. And then she moved again. Claire emerged from behind the barrier with explosive speed, her katana held in a low guard position. The blade's polished steel surface caught the arena lights, reflecting them in sharp angles. She angled directly toward Ren's elevated position, her path deliberately exposing her to fire from all three opponents. Sola fired first, her rifle tracking Claire's movement with practiced precision. The plasma bolt screamed through the air, its trajectory aimed at center mass. Claire's response seemed impossible to the observers above. She didn't dodge. Instead, she pivoted on her lead foot, rotating her hips and bringing the katana up in a precise arc. The blade's edge met the plasma bolt at an exact 45-degree angle. The effect was instantaneous and stunning. The plasma didn't splash against the steel or dissipate on contact. Instead, the bolt's energy skipped off the angled surface like light bouncing off a mirror. The redirected shot careened wildly to the left, its new trajectory completely unpredictable. It struck a barrier wall, scorching the surface and causing several cadets in the observation platforms to flinch. Absolute silence filled the arena for 2 full seconds. Then chaos erupted from the watching crowd. Cadets from a dozen species began talking at once, their voices rising in disbelief and confusion. Several instructors stood up from their seats, leaning over the railings to get a better view. What they had just witnessed violated everything they understood about energy weapons and physical materials. Thresh'kal's mandibles spread wide, his forearms uncrossing as he took an involuntary step forward. His tactical mind was already analyzing what he had seen, breaking down the physics, understanding the implications. The human hadn't tried to block or stop the plasma. She had used the blade's angle to redirect the energy, treating it like a geometric problem rather than a question of material strength. Claire didn't pause to acknowledge the reaction. She was already moving again, her eyes locked on Vix's position. The Carathian had frozen momentarily, his compound eyes struggling to process what had just occurred. That hesitation cost him. Vix fired, more from trained reflex than tactical thought. His aim was slightly off, his usual precision disrupted by confusion. Claire saw the shot coming, read his body position and rifle angle. She adjusted her stance, brought the katana up again, and this time she aimed her deflection with specific intent. The plasma bolt struck the blade's edge at a precise angle. The redirected energy shot toward Vix's position, but not toward Vix himself. Claire had calculated the reflection to target the shield generator mounted on his equipment harness. The plasma hit the small device dead center. The shield generator sparked violently, its energy matrix overloading from the unexpected impact. Blue electricity arced across its surface as safety systems attempted to prevent a complete meltdown. The device emitted a high-pitched whine, then went dark. Vix's personal shield, the defensive barrier that every cadet relied on in combat training, flickered and died. Vix looked down at his harness in shock, his 6 limbs freezing in place. Without shields he was completely exposed. One clean plasma hit would cause serious pain and potentially injury, even at training intensity. He had just gone from predator to prey in a single moment. Ren and Sola both stopped firing, their tactical training warring with their disbelief. Standard doctrine said to press the attack, to use their remaining numerical advantage. But standard doctrine didn't account for opponents who could turn your own weapons against you. Thresh'kal moved to the edge of the arena floor, his massive form casting a shadow across the nearest barrier. His amber eyes tracked every detail of Claire's positioning, her blade angle, her footwork. Understanding dawned across his features like sunrise over a dark planet. "She's been planning this from the beginning," Thresh'kal said quietly, though his voice still carried to the nearest instructors. Every movement, every position, every escape. It wasn't survival. It was setup. A Vrexian tactical instructor beside him clicked her mandibles in acknowledgement. She let them establish patterns, learn to predict her movements, gain confidence in their coordination. Then she introduced a variable they couldn't account for. The blade, Thresh'kal finished. They trained against energy shields and evasion tactics. They never considered an opponent who could weaponize their own fire against them. On the arena floor, Claire had already pressed her advantage. With Vix's shield down, the tactical equation had changed. Ren and Sola now had to worry about hitting their teammate with their own shots if they weren't careful about their firing angles. Claire used this immediately, positioning herself so that any shot toward her also created a risk of hitting Vix. The Carathian scrambled backward, trying to find cover while his hands fumbled with the dead shield generator. His compound eyes darted between Claire and his teammates, calculating escape routes, assessing danger. Claire moved with him, not attacking but maintaining the pressure, keeping him off balance. Sola's scales flashed through rapid color changes indicating stress and uncertainty. Her Torvian hunting instinct screamed at her to attack, to use her superior firepower. But her academy training warned her about the danger of friendly fire. She held her position, her rifle tracking Claire but her finger hesitant on the trigger. Ren had the clearest shot from his elevated position, but he had also just witnessed 2 perfect deflections. The Keltharian's analytical mind was working through probability calculations. Could the human do it again? Was it luck or skill? Could she control where the deflected plasma went, or had those redirects been fortunate accidents? Claire answered his unspoken questions by looking directly at him and settling into a ready stance, her katana angled precisely, her body language calm and prepared. The message was clear. Try me and find out. The timer showed 30 seconds remaining. Thresh'kal watched the standoff develop, his tactical assessment shifting with each passing second. The human had accomplished something remarkable. She hadn't won yet, hadn't disabled all 3 opponents or survived the full duration. But she had fundamentally changed the nature of the engagement. Her opponents no longer possessed overwhelming superiority. They were cautious now, uncertain, operating outside their training parameters. A Keltharian instructor in the observation platforms spoke loudly enough for others to hear. This is absurd. 3 plasma rifles against 1 blade. They should simply coordinate fire and end this. But an older Torvian combat veteran shook her head, her scales showing the deep purple of wisdom. You don't understand what you're watching. The human has turned their doctrine against them. Every shot they fire is now a potential weapon for her. The more they attack, the more dangerous she becomes. Thresh'kal's mandibles clicked slowly, rhythmically as he processed the full implications. This wasn't stubbornness or human arrogance. This was deliberate tactical philosophy, refined through centuries of Earth's military history. Humans had always faced superior technology, superior numbers, superior firepower. They had learned not to fight those advantages directly but to redirect them, to turn strength into liability. The katana wasn't primitive. It was a tool designed for exactly this purpose: precision, control, and the ability to transform an opponent's attack into their own defeat. On the arena floor, Claire began moving again, circling toward Sola's position. The blade remained ready in her hands, its edge catching the light like a promise. 20 seconds remained on the timer. Sola made the decision first. Her Torvian hunting instincts overrode her caution, and she signaled to Ren with a rapid hand gesture. The Keltharian understood immediately. They would coordinate their fire, create a crossfire pattern that would be impossible to deflect in multiple directions simultaneously. Even if the human could redirect 1 shot, she couldn't handle 2 at once from different angles. Ren moved to his right along the elevated barrier, establishing a firing angle that positioned him perpendicular to Sola's position. Now they had Claire caught in an L-shaped kill zone. Vix, still without shields, scrambled further back to avoid being caught in their coordinated fire. Claire saw the tactical shift happening and recognized the danger immediately. Her eyes flicked between both shooters, calculating angles, distances, timing. The arena floor offered limited cover in her current position. If she ran for a barrier, they would track her movement and fire during her approach. If she stayed still, she was a stationary target for 2 experienced shooters. The timer showed 15 seconds. Sola and Ren fired simultaneously. 2 plasma bolts converged on Claire's position from 90-degree angles, their brilliant blue energy lighting up the arena floor. There was nowhere to dodge, nowhere to run, no barrier close enough to reach in time. The watching cadets in the observation platforms leaned forward, certain they were about to witness the inevitable conclusion. Claire moved the katana with blinding speed, not to deflect but to reflect. She angled the blade's polished surface to catch Sola's incoming shot, but instead of redirecting it away, she bounced it directly into the path of Ren's bolt. The 2 plasma shots collided in midair, their energies meeting and creating a brilliant flash of light that washed across the entire arena. The flash was intense enough to trigger automatic protective responses in every species present. Compound eyes shuddered. Transparent membranes slid across sensitive optical organs. Humanoid species squinted and turned away reflexively. For 3 full seconds, everyone in the arena was effectively blind. Everyone except Claire. She had anticipated the flash, had planned for it, and had closed her eyes a half-second before the collision. When the light burst occurred, she was already moving, her eyelids protecting her vision while her spatial memory guided her feet. By the time the flash faded and the shooter's vision cleared, Claire had closed half the distance to Sola's position. Sola blinked rapidly, her scales shifting through confused color patterns as her vision returned. Her rifle came up automatically, trained reflexes taking over. But her targeting was off, her depth perception still recovering from the intense light. She fired wildly, the plasma bolt passing a full meter to Claire's left. Claire covered the remaining distance in 4 running steps. She came in low, her body compact and balanced, the katana held in a 2-handed grip. Sola tried to track her with the rifle, but Claire was already inside the weapon's optimal engagement range, too close for effective aim. The katana moved in a precise horizontal arc, not at Sola but at her weapon. The blade's flat side struck the plasma rifle's barrel housing with carefully controlled force. The impact wasn't enough to cut through the reinforced material, but it was perfectly placed to strike the rifle's focusing array, the delicate component that shaped and directed the plasma discharge. The array cracked with an audible snap. Warning lights flashed along the rifle's housing as safety systems detected the damage and automatically disabled the weapon to prevent dangerous energy buildup. Sola's rifle went dead in her hands, its power cell locked down by failsafe protocols. Sola stared at her useless weapon, her scales flashing orange with shock. She hadn't been hurt, hadn't been touched by the blade's edge, but her primary weapon was completely disabled. Claire was already moving past her, turning toward Ren's elevated position. The Keltharian had recovered his vision faster than Sola, his species' optical biology more resistant to sudden light changes. He saw Claire coming and made a tactical decision. He dropped from his elevated position to the arena floor, trying to create distance while maintaining firing capability. His rifle came up as his feet hit the ground. Claire was faster. She closed the gap while Ren was still stabilizing from his drop, before he could establish proper shooting stance. Her approach was direct, economical, no wasted motion. Ren fired from an awkward position, his shot going high and wide. He tried to backpedal to create space, but Claire matched his movement perfectly. The katana came down in a diagonal strike, again using the flat of the blade rather than the edge. It struck the connection point where Ren's rifle's power cell interfaced with the main housing. The impact was precise, surgical. The connection broke with a crack of stressed metal and polymer. Ren's rifle emitted a declining whine as its power supply separated from the firing mechanism. The weapon became an expensive piece of dead weight in his transparent hands. He looked down at it, his internal organs visible through his skin showing the rapid pulse of his confusion and frustration. 2 down. Claire turned toward Vix's position. The Carathian had used the chaos to try relocating to a more defensible position, but without his shield and with his teammates already disabled, his options were limited. His 6 limbs carried him rapidly along the arena wall, trying to maintain distance while looking for an opening. Vix fired as he moved, his compound eyes allowing him to track Claire while navigating. But his shots were defensive now, meant to keep her at bay rather than eliminate her. Claire deflected 2 bolts with minimal blade movements, the redirected energy splashing harmlessly against distant barriers. The timer hit 5 seconds. Claire accelerated into a full sprint, closing the distance to Vix faster than his multiple legs could backpedal. His rifle tracked her desperately, firing continuously now in near panic. Each shot either missed or got deflected, the plasma bolts creating a light show across the arena but accomplishing nothing. At 3 seconds, Claire reached striking range. Her katana moved in a rising arc, catching Vix's rifle from below. The blade's flat side struck the weapon's trigger assembly with precise force. The component shattered, pieces of it scattering across the floor. Vix's rifle, like his teammates' weapons, became instantly useless. The timer reached 0. A loud tone echoed through the arena, signaling the end of the 3-minute examination period. The combat simulation officially concluded. Claire stood in the center of the floor, her katana held loosely in one hand, her breathing elevated but controlled. Around her, 3 cadets with disabled weapons and shocked expressions tried to process what had just happened. Thresh'kal walked slowly onto the arena floor, his 4 arms hanging at his sides, his mandibles clicking in a complex rhythm. He looked at each disabled weapon, then at Claire, then at the observation platforms where 60 cadets sat in absolute silence. His voice carried across the space, measured and clear. Combat examination concluded. Cadet Walsh has survived the full duration and disabled all 3 opponents without causing injury to any of them. He paused, his amber eyes meeting Claire's steady gaze. Examination status: passed. The observation platforms remained silent for several long seconds after Thresh'kal's announcement. Claire lowered her katana completely, holding it at rest position with both hands on the grip, the blade pointed toward the floor. Her chest rose and fell with controlled breaths as her heart rate gradually returned to normal. Sweat dampened her training uniform, but her expression remained calm and focused. Ren was the first of the 3 defeated cadets to speak. He set his disabled rifle on the floor carefully and approached Claire, his transparent form shimmering under the arena lights. "How?" he asked simply, his voice carrying genuine confusion rather than anger. "We had superior weapons, numerical advantage, coordinated tactics. Everything doctrine teaches should have guaranteed our victory." Claire met his eyes respectfully. "You had all those advantages," she agreed. "But doctrine also taught you that those advantages were absolute. You believed plasma couldn't be countered by steel, so you never prepared for someone who would try." Sola approached as well, her scales shifting to a thoughtful blue-green. "You used our confidence against us. You let us believe we were hunting you when actually you were studying us the entire time." "The first 2 minutes weren't about survival," Claire confirmed. "They were about learning your patterns, your coordination timing, how each of you responded to different situations. I needed to understand how you thought before I could counter what you did." Vix skittered closer on his 6 limbs, his compound eyes reflecting fragmented images of Claire from multiple angles. "The blade deflections. Those weren't lucky accidents. You calculated those angles precisely." Claire nodded. "Plasma behaves predictably when it encounters angled surfaces at specific trajectories. It's basic physics, just applied in a way most species stopped considering once energy shields became standard. Humans couldn't afford to stop considering it. We didn't have shield technology for most of our history." Thresh'kal had been listening to the exchange while circling the group slowly, his tactical mind processing everything he had witnessed. Now he stepped forward, his massive form commanding immediate attention from everyone in the arena. "What Cadet Walsh has demonstrated today goes far beyond simple combat technique," he said, his voice pitched to carry to the observation platforms. "She has revealed a fundamental weakness in our collective military doctrine. We have become so dependent on technological superiority that we have forgotten to account for opponents who think differently than we do." He gestured toward the disabled weapons on the floor. "These rifles represent centuries of refined energy weapon technology. They are powerful, accurate, and deadly. Against any opponent following standard galactic combat doctrine, they are nearly unbeatable." His mandibles clicked slowly. "But Cadet Walsh does not follow standard doctrine because humans developed their combat philosophy in isolation from the rest of the galaxy. They faced different challenges, developed different solutions, and learned different lessons." A Torvian instructor in the observation platform stood up, her scales showing the orange of challenge. "With respect, Commander, this was one engagement under controlled conditions. In actual combat, against real threats, primitive weapons would still fail." Thresh'kal turned toward the instructor, his amber eyes steady. "You missed the point, Instructor Keela. The weapon itself is not what matters. The katana is simply a tool. What matters is the philosophy behind its use. Humans have spent millennia learning to face superior forces and find ways to win anyway. That philosophy, that approach to problem-solving, is what we witness today." He turned back to Claire. "Explain your strategic thinking. Not the specific techniques, but the underlying principles." Claire considered her words carefully before speaking. "Human military history is full of technological mismatches. We've faced opponents with better weapons, better armor, better resources. We learned that you don't beat superior technology by matching it directly. You beat it by changing the conditions of engagement, by finding angles the technology wasn't designed to handle, by turning advantages into liabilities." She gestured with her free hand. "Plasma rifles are designed for ranged combat against shielded or evasive targets. They're optimized for certain conditions. I simply created conditions they weren't optimized for. Close quarters, deflected fire, psychological uncertainty, and precision targeting of equipment rather than personnel." "Adaptive thinking," Thresh'kal said. "You identified your opponent's assumptions and violated them systematically." "Yes, Commander." Thresh'kal was quiet for a moment, his forearms crossing over his chest again. Then he addressed the entire arena, his voice carrying authority and finality. "Cadet Walsh's examination is concluded. Her final score, honors distinction. Furthermore, I am filing a formal recommendation with the Academy Command Council." Murmurs rippled through the observation platforms. Honors distinction was rare, reserved for examinations that demonstrated exceptional skill or innovation. Several cadets leaned forward to hear what recommendation would follow. "I recommend that the Galactic Combat Academy establish a new elective course, Human Adaptive Combat Philosophy," Thresh'kal continued. "The curriculum would focus not on specific human weapons or techniques, but on the strategic thinking that allows a technologically inferior force to prevail through unconventional approaches. Cadet Walsh will be invited to assist in developing this curriculum if she accepts. Claire's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her composed expression. Commander, I'm honored, but I'm still a cadet myself. I'm not qualified to. You are qualified by demonstration, Thresh'kal interrupted. You just defeated 3 armed opponents using principles that none of our instructors fully understood until today. That qualifies you to teach those principles to others. A young Keltharian cadet in the front row of the observation platforms raised his hand hesitantly. Thresh'kal acknowledged him with a nod. Commander, the cadet asked, his voice uncertain, would you fight Cadet Walsh yourself? In a similar demonstration? The question hung in the air. Every eye in the arena turned toward Thresh'kal, waiting for his response. The massive Rection commander looked at Claire, then at her katana, then back at the young cadet who had asked the question. His mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. I would be honored to face Cadet Walsh in combat, Thresh'kal said clearly. And I would bring more than just plasma. The observation platforms erupted in excited conversation. Cadets from a dozen species began talking over each other, discussing what such a match would look like, what weapons Thresh'kal might choose, whether the humans' techniques would work against an opponent who now understood her philosophy. Claire bowed formally, the traditional earth gesture of respect between warriors. Thresh'kal studied the gesture for a moment, then attempted to replicate it, his massive form bending forward in approximation of Claire's posture. It was clumsy and imperfect, but the intent was clear. Your blade, Cadet Walsh? Thresh'kal said as he straightened. May I examine it? Claire reversed her grip and offered the katana handle first, the proper way to present a blade to another person. Thresh'kal took it carefully in 2 of his 4 hands, holding it up to catch the light. He studied the simple steel, the wrapped handle, the elegant curve of the blade. No power source, no targeting system, no energy matrix, he observed. Just metal and skill. Just metal and skill, Claire confirmed. That's all it ever needed to be. Thresh'kal returned the blade to her with the same care she had shown in offering it. Dismissed, Cadet Walsh. Honors, distinction. And congratulations. Claire sheathed the katana and saluted properly before turning to leave the arena floor. As she walked toward the exit, the cadets in the observation platforms began to applaud. It started with a few individuals, then spread rapidly until the entire arena echoed with the sound. Ren, Sola, and Vix joined the applause, their initial shock and frustration transformed into respect. They had lost the engagement, but they had learned something valuable in the process. Thresh'kal watched Claire disappear through the arena exit, his tactical mind already working on the curriculum proposal he would submit. The galaxy had fought the same way for so long that innovation had stagnated. Perhaps what the coalition military needed was exactly what this human had brought: a fresh perspective, unconventional thinking, and the willingness to challenge assumptions that everyone else took for granted. Steel couldn't stop plasma. That fact remained true. But steel didn't need to stop plasma. It just needed to redirect it,